Cast on Manx Radio from midday till 1, Monday to Friday.
That's Dubai. Good afternoon. Welcome to Mannin Line on Manx Radio. Today, a Treasury special. Dr. Allinson is with us through till 1 today. If you want to talk about or ask questions about Treasury's role, the impact on other departments, and where we go from here, but anything else, we're open line with the Treasury Minister through till 1 today. Text, email, call and WhatsApp with Alex Allinson, MHK. Faster Mike, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Andy.
Good to see you again after the summer break. A question. This is Bill who dropped a note in, cut to the chase. Are we contributing to reserves or are we drawing down at the moment?
We're drawing down. We're absolutely drawing down. I was quite honest about that during the February budget. And this year we'll be drawing down, we think, around about 150 million from reserves. This is to balance the books in terms of how much we spend, both in terms of revenue expenditure on ongoing, but also capital expenditure. Don't like to do that, but we need to grow our economy. We need to grow our tax receipts to pay for the stuff that we expect and we should expect on the island.
So is there a strategy for that then, apart from a day-to-day plan, but are we hoping to get back to some point where we're contributing to them?
Absolutely. So what we set out in February was a 5-year financial plan to gradually ease the drawdown on reserves. And again, one of the big reasons we're drawing down 150 million this year is because catch up on the 2 years of COVID and also the massive increases in inflation and the cost of living we saw last year, which hit people, and government stepped in yet again to try to support the local economy, but also hit government as well. And so we need to balance those books. We have a healthy level of reserves, but I do not take those for granted. Those have been built up by previous generations, and we need to return to a completely balanced budget. But at the same time, I've been quite clear that I don't want those sort of cuts that previous administrations had to put into place, real periods of austerity, especially at a time of high inflation and high interest rates.
Yeah, in that case, it brings me on to COVID. You mentioned that. How long is it going to take us to get over the COVID effect?
That's a really good question, and it depends what aspects of COVID. I think that those 2 years have changed the world. For some people, they could completely change their lives. They've lost relatives, they've lost loved ones, or they've developed long COVID, which now stops them doing the things they want to do and perhaps even stops them working. And we've been trying to monitor some of the long-term effects of this. So there's the very human effect. I think it's changed society very much in terms of the way we deal with each other. We're much more online. We're doing more shopping online. It's turbocharged all that. It's also changed economics. And what we've seen since then is a lot of debt that various countries have built up, and therefore a lot of market volatility. It pulled people and countries apart, and what we need to do is try to get them back together again now, and get people working in the same direction. But obviously on the back of that we had the war in the Ukraine, which again has again caused market volatility. We've seen the increase in gas prices and oil prices. Those are ongoing, and we're now seeing big tensions in between some of the major powers in the world, which will always have a knock-on effect to us here. So I don't think things will ever be the same as they were in 2019. I think things have changed dramatically. But what we do need to do is invest in our population, invest in our people, and invest in our future. And so that will take some money from our reserves to do that. But at the same time, we do need to invest those reserves properly, get the interest from those reserves properly, and get back into a position where we can start shoring them up and building them up yet again.
Okay, let's go. David's with us now. David, you're live with Dr. Allinson.
Oh, good afternoon, Andy. Good afternoon, Dr. Allinson. I'd like to seek the Minister's opinion, if I may, on issues related to pink book figures. I'm doing this in light of an Information Commissioner's decision notice from December of 2021. Now, to sum this notice up, the Commissioner, who has an obligation to promote good practice under the Act, stated that it was incorrect for a public authority to withhold redacted pink book figures, and in the case in question was capital future expenditure schemes. And whilst this may stem from a policy decision, such a policy decision cannot override the right to information under the Freedom of Information, and it shouldn't be withheld. Now, in his notice, the Commissioner invited the Treasury to review and update their policy decision in accordance with the Freedom of Information legislation. So my question to the Minister is, do you agree with the Information Commissioner? Would you hope your department follows good practice? And are you going to unredact your figures?
Okay, well, thank you very much, David. I mean, first of all, yes, I don't want to get into any spats with the Information Commissioner. They're there as an independent body, independent person to judge on the best way of releasing information. One of the things we did in February was dramatically change the way we deal with capital expenditure. Previously, everything was put out in the Pink Book a year in advance, and departments just had a one-time only opportunity of putting things in the capital programme. And what that meant was that sometimes schemes were rushed, they weren't worked up properly, and so they weren't properly developed either in terms of costing or scope, but they were put in the Pink Book. And then what we found was that only about 60% of those capital programmes ever came to anything, but a lot of money was wasted on reports and architects' fees. What we've done now is change that since February so that we set out right from the start some things in the Pink Book, but also we'll have another 3 opportunities for departments to come forward with plans for the capital programme throughout the year. We've also created a project development fund, which means that those departments that want to, for instance, build a new school, can access that fund, access the ability to employ architects, to employ project designers, to get the schemes completely worked up and costed properly, so that when they hit Parliament, when they hit the House of Keys for approval, we know what we're voting for. And these are governance issues to try to make sure that those schemes that come forward for voting are costed properly, and we try to prevent some of the expensive overruns we've seen. But I completely agree with you that, from a Treasury perspective, we are very, very keen to comply with the Information Officer and certainly not to redact those bits of information that can be made available. However, there are some bits of information, particularly before they go out for tender, where it would be probably a bad idea to make builders aware of exactly how much money was on the table before we ask them to bid against each other for providing that.
Yeah, that's all very well, Minister, but I've submitted a request to your department 2 months ago seeking redacted figures from years ago, pre-COVID, so they're all historical now. You're still refusing to give me that information. You're refusing to give me any information in response to that information request over 2 months. Your civil servants are continually invoking a Section 13 against me, saying they need more time to consider what exemptions apply. So it seems to me you're predetermined the fact that you're not going to release even historical information. Well, this is just not unacceptable. Durham Watterson has been frustrated. You've seen the written question he's done in Tynwald about responses from Freedom of Information. I'm afraid your department used to be absolutely superb at answering Freedom of Information. Now, I don't know if you've got a new change of governance there, but the staff are just continually fobbing me off, and it's just unacceptable.
Well, I'm sorry, David. I'm sorry that you feel that you're being fobbed off. I mean, in the written response to Durham Watterson, we've shown that actually all our Freedom of Information responses are on time. Sometimes we do need some extra time to actually look at all the finer details, because a lot of the Freedom of Information requests we're currently getting, and we're getting loads, are very, very extensive and actually employ a lot of officers' time. I'd take them away from their desk job to answer these, but we'll certainly try to answer your questions in full and comply with the Freedom of Information legislation.
Okay, just briefly, David, can you tell us what it was about? Any specifics about what you wanted to know?
It's about desk capital expenditure, and I'm glad the Minister mentioned school buildings because we've got the ongoing saga with Castle Rushen, and it's about the expenditure for that. Now, I've submitted probably 10 or 15 FOIs over on Castle Rushen High School and the project, and eventually we're getting the information, but I've got hundreds of pages, but every time, Andy, it's a battle. There's this, I genuinely believe this, and I may be wrong, but there's a perception within many government departments, and the champion of this is the Department of Infrastructure, actually, because they're responsible for school real estate, is on withholding the information. And you can see how frustrated Ian MacDonald was in his department. We've now got a new information commissioner. The deputy's gone, and I think the whole system is going to come down like a pack of cards, quite frankly.
Okay, all right, David. We appreciate that. Thanks for bringing that situation to our notice. Could you just take us through the, if you like, the matrix, the equation whereby Castle Rushen will be built, Dr. Allinson?
Certainly. I mean, this is something that the Minister for Education, Sport and Culture is committed to, that I'm committed to in terms of Treasury. We have worked up various schemes over the previous administration, but with all the extra building now in the south, we need to make absolutely certain that any school that's built there on the close to the existing site of Castle Rushen High School has the capacity to meet for present needs and also future needs. It's now been put into the Project Development Fund, so money has now been made available to the department to go ahead and actually get some concrete plans drawn up, which can then go out for consultation both with the local community, but more importantly with the education community and the parents and pupils of that use Castle Rushen at the moment. This will probably be a phased project, because the plans are we've already built the new playing fields, and the old playing fields will cater for the new schools. We're building a brand new school right next to the existing schools, so we don't interfere with education. That needs to be done quite carefully, obviously for health and safety reasons, but we're absolutely committed to providing that money going forward, both to rebuild a new school, but also look at other issues in that area, particularly in terms of the swimming pool.
Okay, Bonzo. Hi, Bonzo. You're live with Dr. Allinson.
Hi, Andy, and hi, Alex. Yes, knowing there's a lot of people on the line waiting to speak to you, I'll be brief. Is there going to be a mini budget in either October or November, Tynwald? And if not, why not?
I've got no plans on introducing a mini budget. We set out the budget quite clearly in February. The only things that have changed since then are a decreasing rate of inflation. But what we are dealing with at the moment is obviously increased wage requests, particularly from the private sector. So there are no plans to have any sort of mini budget later on in the year. Thank you very much for keeping your question brief. But if you want to ask me a longer question, government conference next week. We're going to have set question and answer sessions, both for me, Chief Minister and Health Minister there, which people can come along to on Wednesday evening and ask anything they want.
Okay. Sorry, do you think there should be a mini budget, Bonzo?
Well, I don't think that the situation with the structural deficit that we have, which is, I gather, more like 200 million rather than 150 million, and a situation where we have uncertainty about reserves, because even though Alex has stated that he's confident about reserves, of course, what he hasn't said is how much we have left in liquid reserves. And those are going to be drawn upon very, very quickly. You have Manx Care, for example, just today, saying that it is, well, essentially £27.5 million short, and is contemplating a variety of unpleasant options, including a nuclear option. These things simply can't wait.
But Bonzo, they're not waiting. I mean, there's ongoing negotiations with the Department of Health and Social Care, with Manx Care, regarding their budgets. What we're doing at the moment, on the run-up to the budget next year, is meeting with all departments, looking at their spending forecasts now, seeing how they'll go in the future. What mini budgets normally are a change of track, are a reset. And as I said, at the moment, I don't think there's any necessity for resetting. If we do need to, in terms of drawing down on reserves or looking at increasing taxation, we normally leave that for the budget itself. But if there are any requirements to bring in something sooner, I'll certainly do that.
Okay, final word, Bonzo.
Well, I think you're going to find that you're going to need to do that sooner than you think. I don't think a sort of Canutish approach that yes, the budget process is ongoing as per usual in government and things will work out in February. I don't think that's going to cut it.
Okay, thanks for that, Bonzo. We appreciate it. And David's with us live. David, you're with the Treasury Minister.
Hi, Andy. Could I just ask the Treasury Minister regarding variations to contracts, the procedure from central government, the involvement of a CEO and a minister of a department, especially the former minister, Mr. Thomas, on the DOI. What was the mechanism that Treasury oversees regarding, say, the Isle of Man landing stage, the building there, and the building of the boat? And the second question would be is, what's Treasury's involvement in Manx Care to make sure these overspends don't reoccur every year after year? They're getting bigger and bigger.
Yep. Thanks very much, David. So in terms of variation to contracts, what we would normally do is expect a department to come forward to SACIC, which is the Strategic Asset Committee, with any changes that are entailed, any increasing budget, and get that approved at a very senior level in Treasury. In terms of the Liverpool landing stage, because of the profile of this and because of the money involved, a special committee was set up with Treasury representation to meet on a regular basis right the way through to listen to all the stuff that was coming into DOI and actually have that external governance and then report straight back to the Council of Ministers. I mean, in terms of Manx Care and the financial governance of that, as you know, Manx Care was set up as an arm's length body to the Department of Health and Social Care to actually provide what was in the mandate. Now they have their own finance director, but actually the department also has a finance director which oversees that, and Treasury will deal with Manx Care in terms of getting personal representations from them and looking at their budget. The reason for Manx Care to be set up after the Sir Jonathan Michaels report, which was set up primarily about good governance and good financial governance, was to make sure that the department came in on budget and make sure that healthcare was affordable for the Isle of Man. And I'm sorry that they're still having problems meeting that budget, and so that they've been putting out various press releases about needing extra money. Obviously, from a Treasury perspective, we need to look at that. We need to work with the department to actually say, is there any other way of either raising more revenue for them or reducing some of their costs, which are significant at the moment, and particularly revolving around staff costs, problems in terms of recruitment, but also sending people over to the UK for tertiary care, and those costs are slightly outside of their control but have gone up significantly. So what we're trying to do is whilst the budget in February was trying to put more responsibility on departments to meet their budgets and actually provide good value for money, we're also trying to give them as much resources as possible from Treasury to actually achieve that.
What's your opinion, David?
Okay. Good luck.
Yeah.
But don't forget, when you're spending taxpayers' money, hard-earned taxpayers' money that goes into Treasury, every pound counts. And the overspends, to me, should have been flagged up a lot earlier, and somebody should hold their hands up to say, we made a mistake, or the costings were wrong.
Yeah, no, David, I completely agree with you, and that's why we changed the capital programme. It was one of the previous MLCs when I came in said, Alex, £100 million to you at 10% tax rate is £1 billion that people have earned just to provide you with that money, and you should never take that for granted in terms of our reserves.
Okay, thanks, David.
Bye.
All right, now 12:25.
Good afternoon, Treasury Minister. My name is Nigel Sperring from Albany Tours and Albany House Bed and Breakfast in Peel. This is not a hospitality question today. This is a direct question to yourself as Treasury Minister. And I think as a taxpayer and the other people that are listening on air today, I think it comes the time when we like to need some answers. And my question is, it's a two-part question, is one, with the millions and millions that are over budget in Liverpool, and we know, obviously, it's not capped. And we know also that nobody has taken responsibility for it. I'd like to know why. And I think the people of the Isle of Man would like to know why and why it's not been capped. And secondly, the horse trams that ran from Derby Haven obviously should have gone straight to the sea terminal. And it was passed, the money was granted when the road surface was done. And it never happened because that money disappeared. And it'll probably never raise its head again. So the question I'd like to ask you is, how much, as a Treasury Minister, is your hands tied, and how much can you drip feed to the general public to let us know exactly what's going on? And if your hands are not tied, and you do have a free rein, what are you going to do about it? Because I think it's time that we all need to know, and it's time that things like this need to get pulled together and put to bed. I know it's a straightforward question, but I'd like your answers.
Okay, that's Nigel.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nigel, from the answer phone.
I was just going to thank Nigel for his question, but thank you for hopefully you're listening in. In terms of how much my hands are tied, I mean, Treasury, that obviously, we delegate the money, we delegate responsibilities to departments, but at the end of the day, it's my job to make sure that financial regulations are complied with, and if they aren't complied with, hold people accountable. If I can just go through the two issues that Nigel raised. I mean, first one was the millions of pounds of overspend on the Liverpool landing stage, the ferry terminal there. And who's going to take responsibility? I stood up in July Tynwald very, very deliberately and pointed out that we were still in a very difficult situation completing this project. The project is not capped. It had a budget which has been overrun due to a whole range of reasons that were detailed at that time. We think we are very close to a solution now in terms of the end date for it, and actually also managing to restrict any further overspends and get this delivered on time for the people of the Isle of Man, for the Isle of Man Steam Packet Company. But I think we have been really quite public in terms of some of the problems. As I've already said to David beforehand, we are working very closely with the department and with all the external contractors we've got in the UK to bring this whole project to completion. And then we will be reporting back to Tynwald, back to the public, and also the Public Accounts Committee are doing quite a bit of work over this summer in terms of what happened right at the early stages to get that responsibility and actually say what went wrong, what went right, and how will we do things different in the future with some of these big major infrastructure projects, particularly the ones across. Going back to the horse trams, again, this has been something that has, I think, frustrated a lot of people, both inside Tynwald and out, that there was a clear commitment to provide the horse trams all the way to the sea terminal. For various financial reasons, that was not possible under the last administration with the prom works, which needed to be finished and which were delayed, particularly over COVID, and really affected some of the businesses there. What we now need to do is look at that project again and look at how it could be budgeted and where it is on the DOI's priorities. And I'm very glad that Tim Crookall has accepted the offer to come back into DOI and tackle some of these issues, both the historic ones and the ones in the future, in terms of investing in our critical national infrastructure.
Okay, thank you for that question. Just to go back to the Liverpool landing stage, Treasury Minister, this is almost like a bad dream, and hopefully we will come out of this. Is there? I mean, Nigel was asking about people taking responsibility for it. And obviously Treasury allocates the money. So do you think there will come a point, or do you think there is a point where somebody's held culpable for not being up to the job?
Yes. Right from the start, the DOI have been very, very open in terms of some of the problems that arose early on in this scheme. Very open in terms of some of the projected costs and where those were out of kilter with the actual costs. The Public Accounts Committee, chaired by June Watterson, started gathering information very, very early on and is looking at this intently. And I think their report will probably name names, both in terms of some certain individuals, but also various companies who were involved in this scheme. Now, we have to remember that we're working with some of these individuals and companies to complete this scheme. And so I'm not presupposing any eventual outcome, but I think it's very important, both in terms of this scheme, future schemes, and public confidence, that we draw a line under it, we see exactly where things went wrong, and we improve our procurement. And that's one of the reasons we changed the capital expenditure and capital programme in February, to try to get these schemes properly costed before they hit the ground. In terms of making sure that people are responsible for the spending of taxpayers' money, I suppose the ultimate responsibility is me as Treasury Minister to make sure that we've got the good governance around it. And as I said, we've tried to bolster that with DOI by having regular meetings around the table with everyone involved, including the contractors from across, and getting independent advice in terms of some of the costs we're being told, whether they actually are are accurate, whether they should be contested, and we're going through that process at the moment.
Just a quick one before we take a break. Now, the consultation on the future of 1, 2 and 5p coins closed about 3 months ago, but we haven't had an update on what's happening with the coins.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I've been asking for that as well. I think it was very much a mixed response in terms of whether people thought that keeping small change was important for them. What we're also doing at the moment is waiting for the Department for Enterprise that have been asking very much in terms of more moving to a cashless society, and try to put the results of those two consultations together, because obviously they do gel. And what we need to do is find a solution that works best for the people of the Isle of Man, but also for business here as well.
Do we know when we'll get a result of the consultation?
I will try to get that sorted out as soon as possible. We've got a Treasury Board meeting again tomorrow. They go on. We have them every Wednesday, and I'll ask for an update on that. And certainly I'll try to make sure that Manx Radio is the first to know.
Right, it's 28 minutes to 1. We're live with the Treasury Minister on Manx Radio. You can text, email, call and WhatsApp.
With Ellen Vannin Fuels, home heating oil is made easy. With our free smart monitoring system, you'll never run out or have to think about ordering. Our online accounts and easy payment plans make it really simple to manage. Ellen Vannin Fuels can even help with new tanks, boilers and servicing. Combine all that with reliable, efficient deliveries and we've got it covered. Just call us on 844000. Ellen Vannin Fuels, making life easier.
Riley's Garden Centre for great gift and present ideas, for outdoor clothing and wellies, for all your pet supplies and all the tools and products to get your garden winter ready. For everything for autumn, call in at Cool Road Braddon or visit rileys.co.im.
I had amazing service from the Guernsey Bank Skipton International this week. It's not often you get to speak to a real human. Their follow-up was fantastic, and switching my savings account was so easy and quick.
Is that why you chose Skipton?
No, I saw how competitive their savings rates are, so I gave them a call on 01481 730 730. Turns out it was easier than I thought to move my account to Skipton.
Skipton International is licensed to take deposits by the Guernsey Financial Services Commission and is a participant in the Guernsey Banking Deposit Compensation Scheme. Details at dcs.gg. Terms and conditions apply.
Bringing you the best of the island's produce. Don't miss the Isle of Man Food and Drink Festival, celebrating its 15th anniversary. This year's Food and Drink Festival promises to be bigger and better than ever, with new producers on display and an exciting new space to discover locally produced drinks. It's on Saturday and Sunday, the 16th and 17th of September at the Villa Gardens, Douglas. For more information, visit iomfoodanddrink.com. The Isle of Man Food and Drink Festival, celebrating the very best of Manx produce.
It's that time again. We'll be going out to the Ross Revenge for another Radio Caroline North. This time joined by guest DJs Paul McKenna and Dave Sherwood with the best music from the 60s, 70s, 80s and into the 90s. Some great prizes to be won in the competition, and the weekend is sponsored by Turton Tower Woodland Cafe. Join us this weekend with Radio Caroline North and Manx Radio.
648 and 1368 AM. Pure nostalgia with Manx Radio.
Mannin Line.
The Mannin Line with Andy Wint.
25 to 1. Julian, hi, you're live with Dr. Allinson.
Hi, Andy, and hello, Alex.
Hello there.
Hi. Just a quick one. In light of Moody's credit rating agencies downgrading of Ørsted from stable to a negative outlook following their 27% share price loss amounting to about $8 billion in losses, do you think it's fiscally wise to proceed with the offshore wind farm off Mackald, especially considering the risk in the future of around 100 derelict 1,000-foot turbines left within a few miles of our shores if they go under?
Well, thank you very much for your question, Julian. The answer is yes. A downgrading by Moody's doesn't mean anything in terms of the stability necessarily of the company. They're looking in terms of the ongoing profit and loss. Ørsted are a big player in terms of the offshore wind market. They've got an agreement that they've had with government for some time to develop that, and I know that they're investing very much in terms of having an office on the island and developing their plans further. I think one of the issues we've seen certainly last week was with the bidding rounds in the UK. Nobody came forward to build any new wind farms because of the issue with contracts for difference, and I think that and getting that sorted out, certainly from the UK market, and seeing how we could feed into that is a far more important thing than the financial viability of one or two companies. Ørsted are a large supplier of offshore wind energy to the UK, and I'm certainly confident that they've got a sustainable future. Also, I wouldn't agree with you about the risk of having derelict windmills in the Irish Sea, and particularly in our territorial waters, because we will always need that green energy, whether it's provided by Ørsted or by another supplier.
Julian?
I mean, Vattenfall, the other large company, they've been knocked back with a couple of their wind farms, and some people are saying it's supply chain problems for Ørsted is part of their woes as well. However, they have their own ships, cement and steelworks, so they've kind of helped themselves in terms of having their own supply chain rather than relying too much on other people. But when you talk about contracts for difference, we're talking there about paying them when there's either too much wind and there's no way for it to be put into the system, or there's no wind and they still get paid, which is why most of the countries in the world, like Germany and Denmark, that have gone down the route of wind turbines have had high energy prices for years now, which you can easily see on any of the statistical websites. So do you not think that contracts for difference thing kind of highlights the fact that it's not very economical to go down this route in terms of an energy source?
Well, I think one of the criticisms with the industry to the UK government, and I think there has been a policy of gradually reducing contracts for difference and to get rid of them as energy prices go, unfortunately have gone up in terms of hydrocarbons, but as green energy has become by far the cheapest way of producing electricity. I mean, what the companies will say is, although Ørsted may have their own supply chains, the price of concrete, the price of transport, the price of steel has still gone up significantly. And if you decrease your contracts for difference and affect that sort of budgetary return on a long-term investment, it will affect the long-term feasibility of some of these major schemes which cost billions to put in. I mean, in answer to your original question, I think there is still a major role to play for offshore wind in terms of scale and its ability to produce the sort of electricity that the world needs at the moment. And I think companies like Ørsted are absolutely key to develop some of those new technologies, particularly the recycling of some of the bits of wind farms that need to be replaced on a regular basis.
A final word, Julian?
I'm not sure about the cost of the electricity, considering that all the wind operators around the world are demanding a 2.5 times hike in what they can charge, and they basically want to change their contracts for difference, which is what all this problem's about. So I'm not quite sure how green energy is cheaper than what we had before, because that appears to be primarily man-made from a war in Ukraine. Outside of that, I don't see how renewable energies are cheaper than what we had before.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Julian. We've just got to crack on with some more people, but thanks for your call today. Just regarding this offshore wind farm that Ørsted would do, would they bring the electricity onshore here, or would it go into the UK grid?
The size of the wind farms that they're planning would be far in excess of any of our needs, which is why the Chief Minister was very much talking about most of this, that to actually create the right market for it would be going elsewhere, either to the United Kingdom or to the Republic of Ireland. Now, whether we take a spur of that and take some of that energy onto our island is something up for discussion. But if you're going to build a really large facility, and then there are significant economies of scale of building a large offshore wind farm, the vast majority of that will be for export to the United Kingdom.
Okay. Is there any risk to us financially with Ørsted in this project? Is there any public money in it?
This is a private company who are paying for a seabed lease to develop an offshore wind farm. Now, some of the expenditure from the Isle of Man are looking at the governance of that, looking at some of the new legislation that we're going to need to bring in, looking at the environmental studies that we'll need to absolutely guarantee before any of this goes forward, and obviously planning and a whole range of other things. So there will be some expenditure to make sure that what is built is sustainable, is good for the environment, and actually also corresponds to international standards. But in terms of the underlying investment, no, this is private money coming in, and so the determination in terms of whether it's worthwhile for them to do it does slightly depend on the UK market and other markets involved.
Okay, while we're off the East Coast, a message in from Hector, who said, could you ask the Treasury Minister, does Treasury have a view on Kroger gas?
Treasury itself, no. We are completely neutral in terms of whether there is further exploration for hydrocarbons within our territorial waters. What we have done, though, is start to look that if it was there, what sort of taxation regime could you bring in so that if gas was developed, whether we could get actually some revenue coming in for the Manx taxpayer and for to pay for frontline services. But in terms of some of the key decisions about altering the license for them to explore and whether they go ahead with a trial drill or whether they go for the 3D seismic survey, that's very much a decision between them and the Department for Infrastructure, and obviously overseen by the Council of Ministers.
They're talking, if Kroger goes ahead, the gas will revert. It will be brought ashore around Barrow. So if it's not brought ashore in the Isle of Man, how could any tax be levied?
Again, individual companies have looked at how you deal with offshore drilling, offshore oil and gas exploration, and offshore wind farms, and how you can make sure that some of that profit, and we've seen very large profits recently from all those energy companies, how some of those profits can be taxed sensibly. They don't interfere with the sustainability of the schemes, but they can bring in extra revenue to individual governments. Now, one of the parts of the economic strategy which was launched at last year's government conference was looking at widening the tax base and maximising the return from our natural environment. And so looking at taxation of offshore drilling, of offshore hydrocarbon exploration, but also offshore wind farms and other ways of creating renewable energy is key to part of our long-term taxation strategy.
Okay. The Treasury may be neutral where Kroger's concerned. What about constituency MHK, Dr. Allinson?
Myself, I've made my position quite clear. In that I accept that a license has been granted to Kroger, and that license, should be pursued, and they should be allowed to do what they want to do within that license. They've asked for a variation in that, and what I'm waiting for really is a response from the Department for Infrastructure in terms of the validity of their argument that they should go ahead with test drills. What I have said, though, and what Tynwald has actually said, is that Kroger have got the ability to explore for hydrocarbons, but no new licenses would be given to anyone, given the fact that we've now declared a climate change emergency since that was originally granted, and that we know the effects of climate change, and we can see what those effects are having right the way around the world.
Okay, a private member's bill question from the answer phone.
Hello, Andy. This is Daisy here. I've just got a question, and it's with regard to assisted dying, assisted suicide. I was wondering, where would you stand legally if you had a life insurance policy? Would they still pay out if you'd opt for the assisted dying? Would your life insurance policy still stand? That's all. I just want to say also thank you, Andy, for your show and for giving people a voice. Thank you. Bye.
Well, thank you very much, Daisy, for doing that recording and contacting the show. This is one of the issues that I have looked into in terms of drafting the bill. There are some jurisdictions which on the death certificate put assisted dying as the cause of death. With our bit of legislation, and obviously there will need consultation with the judiciary, what we would record on the death certificate would be the person's underlying illness, so the cancer that they died of, not assisted dying. So it should not affect life insurance policies, because the cause of death would be the actual illness that they had to actually then request assisted dying.
It's 1:45 on Mannin Line, live with the Treasury Minister.
Everyone's more conscious of energy usage nowadays, so Manx Utilities has begun installing smart meters for standard domestic customers island-wide. With our Smart Living app available too, you'll be in control of tracking and managing your energy. No need to contact us. We'll be in touch when we're ready to fit your smart meter. Visit the Smarter Living page at manxutilities.im. Manx Utilities, delivering a smarter future.
Spectrum Windows. If your house needs a new look and your windows ain't in red, keep those cold breezes out and make it look like new again. Spectrum Windows, Spectrum Windows. Quality through and through. Great work guaranteed to you. Spectrum Windows, Spectrum Windows. Spectrum Windows.
He'll help keep your garden looking fine. He makes it easy and he saves you time. He'll save you cash. He's Johnny Trash.
Tired of endless trips to the skips? Fortnightly curb collections from Johnny Trash, the eco-friendly way to deal with garden waste. All for the equivalent of just $3.25 a week. Sign up on their Facebook page or call 477 767.
He'll save you cash. He's Johnny Trash.
6 incredible albums and a worldwide record deal have made Nathan Carter one of country music's brightest stars. And now you can catch him live at the Gaiety Theatre on September 14th. Book now for Nathan Carter and his band at villagaiety.com or on 600 Channel 5. Presented by RS Promotions and supported by your nation station, Manx Radio.
Tonight at 6 here on Manx Radio, join Kiri Kermode and myself, Simon Clark, for Countryside.
We hear from some of the children taking part in the Ballath Horticultural Show, some of the winners and some of the organisers.
I visited the Manx Chasers National Qualifier at Billig Farm in Derby. I went along to see some vintage tractor machinery in action at Ballacrebban Farm in St Jude's. And also, I popped into the Ramsey Horticultural Show.
That's all in Countryside tonight here on Manx Radio at 6 o'clock. And don't forget, you can download and subscribe to the podcast for free at manxradio.com.
The Mannin Line with Andy Wint.
And Stephen. Hello, Stephen. You're live with Dr. Allinson.
Oh, good afternoon, Andy. Good afternoon, Dr. Allinson, and good afternoon, listeners. If I could have a two-part question, please. The first one is on the structural deficit and the money that is being drawn down. Is what do you expect the drawdown to be for the rest of the 3 years to run? And once the money is drawn out, of course, there's a double problem because we don't have the return on the investment. And the 150, 170, 200 million, whatever it is a significant amount to be invested. And I know that why you're doing it is because we're trying to get over COVID, but it's been a long-term question mark of how to resolve our finances, because if we go back to the time of the scope and policy of government, then it's been around for quite some time of how to resolve these issues. And the second question is, you can take them in any order, is that it's in the government programme to raise the visitor numbers to 500,000, and that's a good thing, but it will require a coordinated approach from hoteliers, carriers, and the entertainment facilities. And I would suggest in order to do that, we will need a third passenger carrying vessel. Now, we own the Ben Macree, and that would be an ideal vessel to do the outports or more ports and start trying to get back the tourist industry that was discontinued. And my question is, have you already given concurrence to the company to sell the Ben Macree or not?
Right, Stephen, thank you very much. Two really, really interesting questions. So in terms of the structural deficit, as you say, the way we're drawing down on reserves, you're absolutely right. It's not just the money you take out, it's the reduced income you get as well through interest. The way we're dealing with that, as I said earlier on, we've got a 5-year plan of reducing that dependence on draws down from our reserves. We're also looking at our investment policy in terms of how we invest taxpayers' money to get the best level of reserves, and hopefully we'll be in a position to make announcements about how that's been restructured fairly shortly. But again, I do take it extremely seriously that we're having to use reserves still to get back into a balanced budget. We're looking obviously at growing the population, and you also raising visitor numbers, and part of that is one, in terms of increased money coming into our economy, but also we know that if we have more tourists coming over here, it makes it far more feasible, due to economies of scale, for people to increase the number of restaurants, invest in some of the hospitality and hotels that we then use 12 months of the year. Now, in terms of coordinated approach, the visit agency in the Department for Enterprise tries to bring together people who run hotels, people who run the tour companies, and also have the Allinson Steam Packet Company on board as well. In terms of keeping the Ben McCree at the moment, that is part of the Sea Services agreements that the company has with the Department for Infrastructure, which looks at the routes, looks at the schedule, looks at the number of vessels. That is due for review. And part of that will be looking at whether it's still in the best interest for the company to keep the Ben McCree going, or the increased capacity of the Manxman, whether that will allow us to increase the numbers. But also we have to remember that more and more people fly to our island, particularly for short breaks. And so intrinsic in this is having a decent aviation policy, trying to increase the number of flights we have coming backwards and forwards to the island, but crucially to make sure that they are dependable and reliant. And we've seen the recent problems, not just on our island, but across Europe and across the world, in terms of the reliability of airlines and the way that simple technical glitches can take down entire nations like the UK that we saw 2 weeks ago. So certainly there is that coordinated approach to growing the visitor economy for the benefit not just of those people and our local economy, but for people on the Isle of Man who can then use those facilities 12 months of the year round.
Okay, final word,
Can I
Stephen?
reply to that, please?
Yes, by all means.
You said there that the Manxman has got greater capacity. That is true, but it can only be in one place at one time. It is basically a tram line. Think upon it as the Douglas tram. It goes between 2 points. It cannot be in 2 points at two places at one time. And if we are to grow the economy, I would suggest we need another ship. Now, the second point is that you said it's what's best for the steam packet. I would suggest it's not what's best for the Isle of Man Steam Packet Company. It's what's best for the Isle of Man PLC and all of us to benefit.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Stephen. We've got to dash on because time's running out for us now. Peter in Bry dropped a note in and just said the Isle of Man does have an attractive tax regime. Has Treasury got any plans? Is there a folder somewhere in the back cupboard marked tax increases?
Not necessarily tax increases, because again, Bonzo was talking about mini budgets, and we've seen that people who start talking about tax rises or reductions halfway through a financial year can cause all sorts of problems. What we do have is a absolute commitment to come back to Tynwald by the end of this year with a long-term taxation policy. Now that needs to look at how we grow government revenue to invest that in our island, and there are various ways of doing that. You can change tax thresholds, you can change tax rates, or you can introduce new taxes. And we've seen things like that happening in terms of a sugar tax and gambling duties and all sorts of things in the past. What we need to do is look at how we develop a full taxation strategy on the back of some of the international taxation rules that are coming in, particularly in terms of a worldwide standard for a minimum of 15% on large multinational corporations. And so all that will be incorporated. So we need to look not just at personal tax, which I know is a very thorny subject for everyone, but also at how we can widen the tax base to raise that revenue to invest in our island.
We've been talking to Dr. Allinson. If you want to follow up on this, we've got an open line tomorrow if you want to add something to the pot as well. one thing I'll say for you, Treasury Minister, is everybody must pay their taxes on time. And this coming Thursday, there's a session, I think, it's at the Welcome Centre in Douglas, isn't it?
It is indeed. I mean, we've always talked about making more efficiencies and having government work better. Online tax returns save an awful lot of time for people. I mean, I do mine. I've helped the kids do theirs, and it auto-populates. It's very easy to use, and it pings the Treasury, and you get a result back almost straight away. So it's a very efficient way of doing your personal tax return. We insist on all companies that they have to use this method, but we know that some people have difficulties using new technologies. Absolutely fine, and we're not trying to make it compulsory in any way. About 60% of people already use digital tax returns, but for those people who are struggling at all with some of the technology, we've got available space now at the Welcome Centre, just round for what's called the online centre, and there are people there who will sit down with you and talk you through exactly how to do it and how to work it. And I think most people will find it much more convenient for them. And obviously, from a government perspective, it means that we can then introduce those efficiencies and really use digital technology for the benefit of everyone.
Okay, they're free, the sessions, by the way, and if you want to book one, you need to call 685-224. 685-224. Sessions this coming Thursday, 10 to midday and 2 till 4. And 3 weeks on Thursday, the 28th, from 10 to midday and 2 till 4. That's it. Thanks for being with us today, Treasury Minister.
Pleasure as ever.
Good to hear from you. And will you come? I wish you a Merry Christmas then. Will you pop back in the new year?
Oh, I'm sure I'll be back before that, Andy.
Right. Thanks to the Treasury Minister, Dr. Allinson. So we've got an open line tomorrow. You can text, email, call and WhatsApp tomorrow. But in the meantime, if you want to use the answer phone, 682-631. Have a rehearse before you do it if you want. Or you can email manninline@manxradio.com. Stick around. Christie's on the way after 1. And thanks to Chris Quirk on the phone.
WINT